Hey guys, late again, sorry, but good to see a lot of you here. Stephanie, you are going to have your work cut out for you, I think, a little bit here. The Deaf versus Heard coverage always does require a bit of a, not a disclaimer, but I guess a warning or a reminder. We are here to think critically. We are not to be binary. We're not here to be team Johnny or team Amber. And if you want to do that, things might not go so well. We just want to be mature and think about this in a legal aspect. That's the part that I find interesting. I do find it quite interesting how many people say they not interested in it at all. That was my initial attitude, but I think you can't really be seriously in true crime and interested in the law, and you have a case that has a global impact like this one has, where you have hashtag justice for Johnny, bear in mind the word justice, and it gets 20 billion views. I think you've got to pay attention to that and look at what is the worldwide view or vibe on justice. And what do we as the true crime community have to say about that? Do we have nothing to say? Do we just toe the line? Now, someone, actually quite regularly, people say, you are not the most authentic voice in true crime. And I always appreciate that because it's a reminder, are you or aren't you? And of course, that is what I'm trying to be. And obviously, if you feel like I'm not, then that's your answer. But you've also got to ask yourself, if 99% of the internet feels a certain way, and it's in their interest to feel that way, then are they authentic? What about the one guy who's saying something else? And I'm not being contrarian to be contrarian. I'm simply saying what I believe, and if it costs me subscribers, so be it. I'm not happy about it. I'm not thrilled about it, but that is part of being authentic. Authentic is, you don't try to be authentic. You're simply being yourself, and that tends to be quite unique. So that's really what we're getting at. So just a quick greeting to some of our regulars, Gathering Place, quite a few members here. Tommy, Joan, Holly Golightly, good to see you all. Sharon Tuck as well. Sunflowers. Sunflower says, I don't know anything about the unsealed docs, so here I am. Well, you're about to learn something. Okay, so this is the part I want to highlight from the unsealed docs, and this comes from I think it's the Daily Beast. I think it's from the Daily Beast. And I'm going to read what it says here. Though Johnny Depp's team spent many hours of the trial trying to paint Heard as the abuser in the relationship, an unsealed motion by Depp's team, right? So this is a motion by Depp's team opposing a mental examination of Depp, argued that the actor should not be subjected to an independent medical examination. So the whole trial was about how traumatized Johnny was. He was abused. It wasn't Amber. He was abused, and how traumatized he was, right? But then he's not going to submit himself to a mental examination because, and he says here, because Mr. Depp is not alleging harm based on specific physical or mental injury. So it's like, so you didn't suffer any physical or mental injury. So what did you suffer? Then it goes on to say, Depp's team further claimed that Mr. Depp does not allege a specific cause of action for intentional or negligent infliction of emotional distress. And then you kind of got to wonder, did the jury know that? I mean, the jury are wanted to give him $5 million in punitive damages, but even he doesn't feel like he suffered emotional distress. But odd. Hey guys, I'm fine. You don't need to do a mental evaluation on me, but can you please give me a couple of million because of what? So then I think you've got to say, what damages should Johnny be getting? Is it for emotional distress, physical distress, or reputational damage, which caused him to not earn an income from movies? But then you say, well, in October, it was already reported that he wasn't getting the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. So what exactly is Amber being punished for if it's not physical or mental injury? And it's also, well, can you prove that he lost an income? I just think it's a really interesting legal question. So these are Depp's own words. This is not from the Amber's legal counsel side. This is an admission, a concession from Depp's own counsel. So they say, Depp's team further claimed that Mr. Depp does not allege a specific cause of action for intentional or negligent infliction of emotional distress. So why were we talking about mutual abuse if that was irrelevant? Why was there hashtag Amber Heard is an abuser if that's not even what his legal team thought to begin with? It does not assert that Ms. Heard's actions caused him a specific psychiatric injury, and does not claim that Ms. Heard's actions caused him to experience unusually severe emotional distress. Now, to me, the crazy part isn't all of that, although that is crazy enough. To me, the crazy part is the fact that Johnny Depp doesn't want to have an independent medical examination. And you've got to ask why. What is going to come out in an independent medical examination? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know whether they take blood tests. I don't know whether they do a psychiatric testing. Maybe they could do a test for narcissism, an actual test. I don't know whether they could test for other things, but for whatever reason, Johnny didn't want to undertake that test. Stephanie says PR like other cases. Okay, so that's the part that I specifically wanted to emphasize. So we're gonna I want to highlight for you guys, for those of you who don't really know what this is all about, I want to just go through the highlights, and then we're going to sort of drill down into it in more detail. So let's start off by just reminding ourselves of the timing of this. So it all starts with Amber announcing that she's appealing, right? And she does so by paying, I think, a $500 registration amount or whatever that amount was to register the appeal. And she hasn't yet paid, some have it as 10.35 million, others have it 8.35 million, but she hasn't paid that amount. She's still trying to raise it, apparently. But in short, she appeals. The next day, he appeals. And then around about that time, his counsel, Camille Vasquez, goes on television. I didn't really watch that whole spiel, but I noticed that the person interviewing him went to their offices, I think in New York, and interviewed everyone. She was gushing all over the legal team, like, you were young, you guys are the best attorneys on Earth, on planet Earth. So if you're the best attorneys on planet Earth, but you didn't actually win a complete, like the verdict wasn't a complete and utter, what's the word? You didn't win outright. You had 2 million found against you. So it's not like this perfect thing. But anyway, gushing completely over, Camille, you're a star, posting a selfie, the person interviewing her, posting a selfie of herself and Camille Vasquez. And then that was followed by Johnny Depp selling his art, I think for 3.4 million or something. So he just sells his art, and that's his own art. That's not art pieces that belong to him. That's his own art creations. And then at the same time, Amber sells her house, and she gets like 1 million for it. Johnny sells art, his own art, like a drawing or a painting of Al Pacino. I think there's another one of I can see her face now. I just can't quite remember her name. But it's a female actress, very well known. Wasn't she the girlfriend of Michael Jackson, or someone who really liked Michael Jackson? Just can't think of her name. And then there's, I think, another painting of Keith Richards. Anyway, so something, a couple of pictures that he's produced, and he sells that for 3 times more than Amber's home. Amber's actually got to sell her home. Can you believe it? She's got to sell her home to fight a court case. She's really committed, isn't she? So Johnny Depp sold 780 art prints, and he made $3.6 million. So I'm going to see if I can show you some of them. Can't quite remember the name of this one lady. Elizabeth Taylor, that's the one. That's the one I'm looking for. Okay. So it's really these artworks that he sells, and this is from My Modern Met. So he sells these and some others, and he makes 3.6 million, and it all sells out in a very short time. And there you can see him sort of doing his art, right? So these are some of the news stories that have come out. That's from the Daily Beast. Unsealed, Johnny Depp, Amber Heard court documents reveal shocking new claims. The plot thickens. Then this is from page 6. Johnny Depp suffers from erectile dysfunction, court docs claim. So that's their way that they are covering it. Then this is from Newsweek. Heard lawyers suggest Depp's erectile dysfunction led to violence, and that's taken a little bit further. And I think that's the same one there. And then, yeah, there's another one that I want to deal with. Unsealed, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard court documents show she refused to take 16 million from him, right? And there's another one talking about texts between Marilyn Manson and so on. And there they are. And we're going to sort of look at those. We might look at those a little bit later. Here's one from Fox News. Unsealed Depp versus Heard docs reveal Aquaman actress was exotic dancer. So that's like kind of quite negative towards Amber Heard. And so the question sort of comes up, who does this reflect on? Who is more damaged by these shocking revelations, right? And that's the question in the poll. And I see right now just under 50% are saying Amber. Amber comes off worse. She's damaged, I guess, in it. And then the rest are other than that. So I think, as usual, lots of support for Johnny Depp for those of you who are here. And once, as usual, everybody hates Amber. That is something I want to talk about. Why does everyone hate Amber? Have you noticed you're not getting any hashtag Johnnies anymore at all? It's not hashtag justice for Johnny or hashtag anything about Johnny. It's either hashtag Amber Heard is finished, that trended today, or hashtag Amber Heard, what was it? It's the title that I've got here. Why can't I think of it? Hashtag Amber is a monster, and then, or it's hashtag Amber Heard deserves an apology. So it's all related to Amber. So it's almost like, although it's about Johnny Depp, actually it's all about whether you hate Amber a lot, not so much, or the few people who defender or whatever, right? But it's the conversation has kind of gone over to Amber. How much you hate her, how much you're not interested in her at all, but it's really all about Amber in a way. So let's just have a look at some of your comments. Alec Granade says, curious about the text from Marilyn Manson. Yeah. The problem with all the texts between Johnny and, the text that you want to touch on is that they are invariably extremely expletive laden. They're words that I never use. And so if you really want to read them out, then you're going to kind of basically get demonetized, or I don't know how you do it. But it's extremely harsh language. It's extremely vile communications, right? And so although you want to cover it, I don't know. I don't really use that language, and that I think is a separate subject. Is if you tend to use extremely coarse, violent language, does that say anything about the kind of person you are? So, in other words, if you and I think quite a good example. Did any of you guys watch the Most Hated Man on the Internet? Did anyone see that? And you see the text that he uses, and then you find out how he was actually living. It's documented. And then you see the very sexually crass, how can I put it? Just shock value things that he's saying. Well, it's a mirror to the shock value things he's doing, right? And so you kind of got to ask yourself as well. So is Johnny Depp the sweet, not very well understood guy who texts in this extremely aggressive, nasty way because he's upset? Or do those texts have a bearing on who the real Johnny Depp is? What do you think? I think you've also got to ask yourself, when you text, do you have these sort of expletives? I mean, even when you're angry, do you use these slurs? Do you refer to your wife or ex-wife repeatedly with these slurs? Do you talk about effing someone's burnt corpse, right? Is that the sort of thing you've said before? I don't think I have ever. I haven't even thought about it. So Zircon says, I like the variety of vocabulary. Would you like it if it was said about you? Sunflower says, using foul language expresses extreme anger. I think you would say using extreme. It's not just foul language. It's like I've never really read anything this vile in my life. Honestly, never, even from people maybe who hate me. I've never read this kind of so much vile stuff. And then it's like, but that's okay. He was upset. And I agree with that. I agree that your language is a reflection of who you are. I definitely agree with that. Baby Boss says, Johnny Depp speaks my language. Okay, so what does that mean? Do you use those words every single day? And what's your sort of lifestyle? Okay, so we're going to try and get through it. It's quite difficult to wade through, but I first want to deal with a couple of other things. So just to recap, she appeals, he appeals. Camille Vasquez goes on television, gets the whole sort of smoke blown up as kind of thing. He sells art, she sells her house. One question I've got is, who unsealed the court documents? And I'm sure those who are Team Johnny will say she did, and those who are Team Amber will say he did. my understanding is that the Johnny Depp crowd, who have been making a fortune out of this, wanted some more content, right? So, and you can understand that. You can understand that after this huge bonanza, the crowd that were milking this case for all it was worth was like, well, what else can we get hold of? Where can we get some more content? And so they then unsealed the court documents, and now the idea is, well, spin it against Amber, spin it in Johnny Depp's favor. And one of the big things that the way that this came onto my radar was I saw someone that I know sort of freaking out because, wow, Amber Heard was a stripper. And so that was like the first and sort of best thing that they could seize upon. That's Amber's crime. Oh, she was a stripper. Wow, she's trash, isn't she? Kind of thing. And I've got to I've got to put up my hand and say I was a stripper when I was younger. Genuinely, I was a stripper. I wasn't in a strip club, but I took my clothes off, and a lot of art students painted my picture. And I don't know whether I would say I'm proud of it. I kind of am. It's also a little bit kind of embarrassing. When I was actually there, I felt a little bit strange, but also owned it, and it was what it was, and I earned some money out of it, and people knew about it, and it wasn't really such a big deal. Is stripping really that crazy? I don't know. Is male stripping worse than female stripping? Is stripping for art worse than stripping for something else? I don't know. But anyway, I did that. I also did medical trials for money. So does that make me morally depraved? Don't date Nick because he took his clothes off. Don't date Nick because he did a medical trial when he was 20. I don't know. Have you done something like that? I don't know. Maybe you haven't. But I don't know. You just get this thing of, so Amber Heard is this absolutely despicable human being because maybe she was an exotic dancer. Okay. Well, I think Johnny married her. Didn't he know that? And he married her anyway. A lot of people do. Um, Linda says she's so evil. Let him say what he wants. He hates her. Okay. Holly Golightly says nothing wrong with it. My friend posed nude for art class. But I think this is any excuse, any reason there is to hate Amber Heard is seized. And I do want to talk about that. I do want to talk about. I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to understand the psychological thing. Why is Amber Heard so supposedly deserving of like 99% of the internet's not like we don't like you, but like we hate you. It's like you lied. You know, you told a lie. You lied. I actually saw somewhere today someone said everything she said in court was a lie. I don't think so. I don't think it was all a lie. I think there was quite a lot of lying, but it certainly wasn't all a lie. But it's like, so does that make her a monster? So does lying make her a monster? Is lying now worse than murder? Is Amber worse than Hitler or Stalin? Is lying now the worst possible? Like, is lying going to overtake narcissism? You're a liar. You lied. That is just unacceptable to me. I don't know. I just find it a bit crazy. So Baby Boss says, if your girlfriend did what Amber did to Johnny, would you be so forgiving? I don't know what Amber did to Johnny. I don't know what you mean, but I'm not a celebrity. So I know you're trying to make this the same level. I'm not a multimillionaire. I'm not a celebrity. I don't do drugs. I don't talk in the language that they do. I'm not the sort of big movie star. I'm not incredibly beautiful. So none of those things apply to me. And I think if you're trying to make it like I understand them because you don't, you're not them. You're not them. So yeah. Anyway, I see it's going quite binary already, where you see exclamation marks and all of that. So Janina Carter says that, and a case came out. Stephanie, can you help me out with this? Do you remember that case that came out of someone who murdered her husband and then she was acquitted? And they said, this is what a victim looks and sounds like. Do you guys remember that case? I covered it really briefly on Patreon. I was going to cover it here, and then I thought, well, let's just move on. Do you guys remember that case? She had kind of certainly a funny surname. Do you guys remember the case that it was a lady who's kind of got quite gray hair and short sort of gray hair, kind of in a bun. And when you actually saw her original picture, it was sort of brown hair. And she spoke quite unemotionally, and she was quite, what's the word? Yeah, just matter of fact, talking about murder because she killed her husband. And people said that is what someone looks and sounds like. That's a dead ringer for that. So anyway, Stephanie's going to check on that. But I remember reading those comments and thinking, wow, where is all of this going? But anyway, we'll deal with that. Janina, I don't know, are you part of the true crime community, or are you someone who just came into it through Depp versus Heard? Because I think a lot of what has happened is people who don't really have an interest in true crime have sort of come in and kind of become instant experts on body language and whatever. And I think to some extent the true crime community have gone, oh yeah, I see that too. Oh, well, everyone's seeing that, so yes, I also see that too. There we go, Danielle Redlick. So let me ask you, when you watched Danielle Redlick, did you think she is totally innocent? She murdered her husband, or she killed her husband, and then she was acquitted of murdering him. She only called 911 like the next day, even though it was only the two of them at home. And people said that is an innocent victim in that situation, right? So Baby Boss says, if your girlfriend punched you, used you, took a dump on your bed, would you use choice words? Get angry? I probably would, but you also making assumptions there. The dogs were also taking dumps all over the place. So you're assuming that happened. Because I think you've got a very low opinion of Amber. So you think, yeah, I think she definitely did that. So anyway. Yeah, so I actually kind of investigated that case, Daniel Redlick, and I was going to do a continuing coverage. And I just thought, I'm kind of tired of this argy-bargy. So I'm just going to move on for now. But that's a really good example where all the Amber Heard haters said, this person who actually killed her husband, that is what a victim should sound like. And she was totally unemotional. And I was like, really? That's interesting. So that's what you want someone to sound like, just completely unemotional, matter of fact, when you took someone's life and they sort of bled out on the kitchen floor. Okay. So anyway, so I think one's got to ask who actually unsealed these court documents. And I think the answer is I don't know. I mean, it's difficult. It's so binary in this case. I think it was the rabid Johnny Depp fans who convinced he's innocent. They, got these documents, not realizing that Johnny Depp himself probably doesn't want them released. Otherwise, they would have been released. If it was going to help his PR, he would have released it. Now, my understanding is he didn't really want it released. And so you've got to ask yourself, okay, so now it has been released. How much reflects badly on him compared to how much reflects badly on Amber? And in my opinion, it didn't reflect very well on either of them, but there's quite a lot that doesn't reflect very well on Johnny, especially that part that I read out right in the beginning. I think it was that. That is pretty huge from a legal perspective. Okay, so these are some of the highlights from the release documents. Shall I bring up something else? These are some of the highlights from the unsealed documents. The first one, revenge porn. It looked like Johnny Depp wanted to submit nudes of Amber into evidence. Now you've kind of got to ask yourself, how is that relevant to her writing this op-ed? Or nude pictures of her, how's that relevant? And I think you can imagine how the internet would have loved that. They would have plastered a picture all over the place. Amber's humiliation would have been absolute, and everyone would have enjoyed that except Amber Heard. I think a lot of women would also have enjoyed that. But is it actually moral? Is it right? And was it relevant? Answer, no. I just think that's quite interesting about he wanted to submit nude photos of her. And you've got to ask, what does that have to do with defamation? Then the other one is Depp's team tried to use the death of Heard's friend against her. And I find that really, really ironic, because one of Johnny's friends died and is still missing under mysterious circumstances. Was it 2002? His colleague from the Viper Room, he vanished and he's still missing, and he vanished in the middle of a court case. And yeah, you have the same idea where Depp's team want to kind of imply it's like, let's throw something into the conspiracy factory and let social media run with it, right? And so the whole idea was, I think a friend of her sister died in a car accident, and the whole idea was, where was Amber? Was Amber driving? Did Amber see him that day? And they were trying to link the two, even no matter how slightly, but if you can bring it to trial, don't worry, social media will run with it, and that's all that matters. Then there's Depp's damning missing texts. Now, the part that's quite interesting is his texts are missing from his side. So what happened to them? And you say, oh no, they just weren't sent, or were they deleted? Then the other part that I find really interesting is this talk that I've heard throughout the trial, that Amber Heard is this greedy, gold digging, shallow, absolutely sort of mercenary figure. I think she only married Depp for money. The only reason she went after Elon Musk was money. She's just money, money, money. And yet she walked away from, I think, $16 million that she could have earned. There's an email to her lawyers where they said you can get half of what he earned from a particular movie because he made this movie while you were married. You would be entitled to half of that. And she said, no, I don't want it. And if you think about it, it's like one movie star saying to the lawyers of another movie star, effectively, that person made that movie, that's their movie, that's their money. I've made my movie, that's how she sort of sees it. But the point is, she walked away from 16 million. She refused to take 16 million, and then you say she's a greedy, like money grubbing. That's all she really cares about. She just cares about money. I can tell you, most of the people who can't stand her would be the first to put their hands up and say, I'm going to take that money. I'm definitely going to take that money. So, but you don't want to make that argument. I think, so the whole argument is she didn't pay a charity millions of dollars. It's like, that is, what a horrible human being. She brag that she's going to give this charity so much money. How much money have you given to charity? I don't care whether you promised to do it or whatever. How much have you actually given? And then you say, this person who was going to do it and did actually give some. I think she gave 100,000 here and some over there. That is her sin, that she didn't complete the transaction. She's totally in it for the money. Well, that doesn't quite fit that narrative. Doesn't quite fit that narrative. Her selling her own home in order to fight a legal battle that she believes in, that she's already losing. Doesn't seem like someone who is all about the money, as far as I'm concerned. Then, so she walked away from millions. Another one is Johnny Depp said that he was not alleging harm from Amber Heard. That's this one. So anyway, I'm not going to take that too much further. Then there are a couple of shockers from Amber's side of the whole equation. Amber listed a series of comparable actors, and they included that she thought she was on the same par as Gal Gadot, for example, which she obviously isn't. Also on the same par, although it has to be said, I think she's acted in the same movie as Gal Gadot, with obviously a much, much smaller role, for example, Justice League. But also supposedly on the same, comparable to Jason Momoa, her co-star in Aquaman. Obviously, that's not true either, and so on and so on. So that did seem a bit over the top, but if you think about it, that's a bit of an exaggeration. It's hardly shocking. Then there's another part that is shocking. The notion that Johnny Depp's photos and audio were subject to manipulation. I found that really incredible. I think I put up a tweet with regard to that. They showed the full transcript of Johnny Depp's recording as submitted, and they showed just how much of it was redacted and changed. So obviously anything that made Amber look good taken out, everything that makes Johnny look good predictably left in, and then you see those blocks like that. And that's why I think it's so weird. It's so black and white. Amber's this monster. She's a liar. She's terrible. Johnny's this wonderful, good fellow. It's like absolutely black and white. And it's like, I don't think either of them are innocent. I don't think either of them are sort of model citizens. And that's kind of the point. Marriages are messy. I think even in normal marriages, no one is completely innocent and no one's completely guilty. That's true in true crime as well, in general. And so you had this furore about Amber editing her photos, and they showed photos that were obviously edited from Johnny Depp. One of them is the one where he's in the train and he's apparently got a mark on his face. There's another one that's also obviously edited. I'll try and find the news articles that cover that. Let me see if I can if I can bring it up. See if I can bring it up. I've got one here. I'm just not quite sure if it's in this one. It's not in this one. It could be in this one. Let me just quickly go through it, if I can. Is it in this one? Just a picture that shows how he may have altered photos. I've seen it. I just can't quite remember where I saw it. Could have been Newsweek. Let's try this one. Not that one either. Okay, I'll have to Google it. Just give me a second. I've got my dog lying on my shoulder here. Johnny Depp manipulated photos. Let's see if it comes up. Yeah, here it is. Came up 3 hours ago. It's also on Newsweek. Let's see if I can show you guys. So this is from Your Tango, and here it is. There are those photos that are allegedly manipulated. You can see darker, darker. And of course, the conversation is just that Amber Heard did that and how despicable. Okay, so let's just continue here. Then, amazingly, in all of this comes up this notion of Russian bots. And so the Unsealed docs show that there was an attempt by the Depp lawyers fighting to exclude evidence of negative social media traffic from Russia, a Russian bot campaign regarding Ms. Heard. And if you think about it, you say, was there a slightly negative social media about Amber Heard in this case? Like, was there a little bit of negative social media towards Amber Heard here? And then you say, well, this was the trial by TikTok, one of the most heavily internetized trials ever. I think it definitely was. And then you've got to ask, was some of that contrived? Was some of that calculated? Was some of that done on purpose? Was any of it? No. 20 billion views for hashtag Justice for Johnny. That was just organic, just happened naturally. Oh, okay. Then the Marilyn Manson text, and I think I'm gonna deal with that next. Johnny Depp's team fought to exclude any references to Marilyn Manson. They thought that would be smearing him and it would make him guilty by association. So it's like, if you think about it, we want to talk about Amber's sister's friend who died. That's not guilty by association, but we don't want to talk about Marilyn Manson. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so should we talk about the texts? I think I've got them here. I'm going to try and read them without reading them, if that makes sense. I'll try and let you guys read them to some extent. Okay. Sorry, that comment's been up a really long time. Sharon says, I love how we may have differing opinions, but can discuss them in chat. Well, let's hope we can keep doing that. Gathering Places, I didn't watch much of the highlights. Okay. Julie says, I honestly didn't have a view when the trial started, but I think there's something increasingly dark about Depp. So let me ask you guys, how many of you guys know about Johnny Depp's business partner that went missing? Have any of you heard about that? Have any of you guys heard about, his surname was Fox? Is it something a lot of you guys know and it's like no big deal? I think he's been missing now for about 20 years. And it was in the middle of a trial that he went missing. So I'll put a link here in case you've never seen it before. It's from TMZ. Johnny's ex-business partner missing, what does Depp know? This is from last year, but this is the story about it. So if you've never heard it, you might want to check it out. So it's his business partner, and his business partner actually took him to court. And in the midst of this court case, this guy disappeared. And kind of at the same time that was going on, Johnny bought a village in France, and he spent millions kind of restoring the village. Every year he was sort of, fixing something up. And then I think in 2015, he put that old village up for sale, I think at various prices, I think $25 million, $55 million, $60 million, and he never was able to sell it. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Okay, so now we're going to go through the texts. So this comes from the Daily Mail. Let me put a link to that if you guys want to check out the source yourselves. I don't think I'm going to read all of these texts, but it's from the Daily Mail, and let's see how many we can go through without it being terrible. So there it starts. You can see it's dated 23rd June 2016. I got an Amber 2.0. I talked to Tony, but this is, there you go. She filed a restraining order. That's his, I think his girlfriend or someone close to him. This is from Marilyn Manson. Said I beat her up and gave the cops my address and said that I, whatever there, and I'm ready to book out of here, right? 2016, 26th of November. And then I guess this is Johnny Depp's response. See if you can spot a couple of expletives. So that's from the 9th of July. Talks about big gay love. I don't know whether they kind of in a relationship. He says, I woke to two lovely photos of a man that seems to be capturing more than my attention. Thank you for remembering. These little tokens keep my heart warm in your absence. I miss you, my brother. We shall exchange precious bodily fluids. Now, I really don't know what to make of that. Is that a joke or more? I don't know. Then he says, don't take no shit. Most important is to stay calm and not give her what she wants, which is, and yeah, it's in all caps, to make you scream, flip out, and feed her narcissism. Trust me, I've been reading a lot of material on that and sociopathic behavior. It is effing real, my brother. My ex, and you know what that word is goddamn textbook. Should have read this SHIT earlier. They're taking me to stage now. Hit me when you can. Big gay love. Now, this isn't really a good example of expletive laden, like harsh, violent, depraved, expletive laden text from Johnny, but it's nevertheless pretty hectic. I mean, just look at what he refers to: narcissism, sociopathic, exchanging bodily fluids with this guy. Not that that's the end of the world, but and he says he's been reading books, I guess, on narcissism. Actually, I must say, when I read it, it doesn't seem that shocking. But basically, that reference to Amber is there. My ex, whatever, is a textbook narcissist. But probably a lot of you will say, I agree with that 100%, right? I don't know if there are more texts, but they're certainly not on this site. Yin Yang says it's a fairly good point. Is an addict most of the time intoxicated, might also be seen in text. Yeah, that is true. Pedals for shows, his latest stream. Women like Kim Kardashian got famous for a sex tape. I don't know how stripping, especially if it's someone's past, matters at all. Plus, stripping seems mild compared to a sex tape. Okay, so I'm now going to take you to some of my sort of preliminary analysis here. I think the first one is this one. And I've titled it, Amber Heard, Just How Relative is Truth? And here I want to do a bit of an interrogation of, so when you want to, let's say you're interested in Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, how do you make your way across the jungles to the truth? How do you go? Do you start hitting hashtags? Do you just I don't know, like, how do you find your way there? Do you get notifications? How do you find your way? So now that Johnny Depp is also appealing, Camille Vasquez is back doing interviews. Bear in mind, the assault trial with a former crew member was quickly settled and brushed under the carpet. Don't forget about that. Meanwhile, the hashtag, right at the time I was writing this, hashtag Amber Heard is a monster, is trending. Now, this is just my personal feeling. It feels like the social media coverage of Depp versus Heard during the trial and after the trial felt to me a lot like high school. Let's all make fun of this person. Let's pull faces. Let's give them names, Amber Turd, whatever. Felt to me a lot like high school. Didn't feel very mature. I didn't see very much intelligence there at all. And it was amazing how even experts, or let's call them professionals on YouTube, got in on that whole act, and that they became quite juvenile as far as I was concerned. You might say, stop spoiling our fun. We were having so much fun and enjoying whatever, maybe, but it feels now like it's gone to junior school. So you kind of went, Amber Heard is a liar, Amber Heard is a liar. You know, it's like at school, you're a liar, you lied, you lied. And then it becomes Amber is a turd. Okay, Amber's a turd, Amber turd. So it's like name calling, name calling. Let's make the name calling worse. Now it's Amber Heard is a monster. Now, hashtag Amber Heard is a monster, that's like a child, the way a child will argue. She's now become a monster based on what? Like, and you know, when in true crime, when you're talking about proper criminal trials where people are murdered, I'm even a bit. I tend to object when someone says Chris Watts is a monster, or Jodi Arias is a monster. Clearly, what they did is monstrous, but calling someone a monster doesn't tell you anything. But I've got to say, there's something pathetic about saying Amber Heard is a monster. It's just like, so if Amber Heard is a monster, what is what is a monster then? I mean, I don't know. I just don't get it. So if lying, and then that's where, and maybe I'm wrong to make light of it. Maybe one's got to say people are really upset about a woman like this. And so why are people upset by a woman like this? And this is my honest opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm totally out of touch, but this is my honest opinion. The reason why people are so emotional, so angry, so bitter, so even childish, is because I think Amber Heard is the classic usurper. Amber Heard is the classic usurper. What does it mean to usurp? What is a usurper? It's a person who takes a position of power or importance in a way that's illegally or unfair or by force or by manipulation or by nefarious means. Someone who gets something, gets their way in a way that they really shouldn't, right? Another word for usurper is a tyrant, a vassal. I'm just trying to think of a better explanation for that. So someone who usurps something is someone who wields power, wields position, but they don't have any right to do so. And so how does Amber do that? Well, because she's beautiful. And so, you know, have you ever been in a situation where you're in a perfectly good relationship and someone else comes along and steals the person that you're with, right? I've got to say, and I think it's kind of funny, although it's maybe not that funny, but I was in a relationship with a really beautiful woman who, I mean, she came from a very beautiful sort of bloodline. A relative of her became Miss South Africa, like a beauty queen. And, you know, a lot of people in her family, her brother's quite handsome, her sister's also beautiful. And she dumped me for a guy who was much, I thought, uglier than me. I was like this handsome triathlete and, you know, golden god kind of thing. And then this guy came along, and he was this short, fat, pudgy, rich guy who smoked, and he was sort of really nothing to look at, and everyone was so surprised. And I think that's worse. I think it's worse being done for someone that you think is less good looking than you are. You might say vanity, and probably there was some vanity. But I think with women, obviously it's a race to be beautiful, especially when you're young. And so a usurper is someone who comes along who's younger than you are, who's more beautiful than you are, who's but also she's low class, she's distasteful, she's immoral. You better than she is, and someone then chooses her over you, and so you are totally right in your. It's like righteous hatred, righteous anger. This person who came along had no right and didn't deserve it, and is a dishonest, despicable, horrible human being. And I think Amber represents that to a lot of you guys. She's not Amber Heard. She's a symbol for usurpers that you've experienced in your life, that have taken over or taken something that meant a lot to you. And so Amber's now your scapegoat for that. It doesn't really matter. It's got nothing to do with facts or evidence. It's anything you can find to feel hatred towards this person makes you kind of feel good. So it's a hate fest, and it's a way of getting rid of these feelings that you have towards perhaps somebody else. That's my analysis of it, and I might be completely wrong. I don't quite understand men who hate Amber Heard. I don't hate her, and I don't particularly like her. I think I quite liked her in Aquaman. I didn't know actually that she was Amber Heard, but I quite liked her performance there. But I don't quite understand. So why do men hate her? Is it because she's maybe bisexual, and so you have some uncertainty about her? Is it because she also ends up divorcing Johnny Depp, and maybe you got divorced? Is it because she's ultimately, maybe you can't get a girlfriend, and she's this unattainable sort of person, and you think that all women are, it's that sort of incel thing going on. You think all women are against you, and so she exemplifies that. I don't know, but she clearly has become a symbol for a lot of people, a symbol of hatred. That's the impression I get. Rose Burns says, looks isn't everything. Beauty is supposed to be skin deep, right? So I've heard a lot of people say, but Amber isn't even beautiful. Okay, well, Johnny Depp thought she was absolutely gorgeous. There was a calculation that came out not that long ago that said that her face is very symmetrical. Maybe she's not beautiful to you. She is a movie star. She was cast in the role of a superhero. You tend to have the more attractive actors, even in the top tier of actors, the more attractive actors make the grade for superheroes. I'll give you a good example. Nicolas Cage wanted to play the role of Superman. I don't think it would have worked. Personally, I don't think he's good looking enough, but you could argue maybe he was. I think there have been a lot of other actors playing the role of Superman who are very good looking. Bridget says she's absolutely gorgeous. They tried to make her ugly. Baby boss, you're so contrarian. Asymmetry is more attractive. Okay. If you say so, definitely not in Hollywood. Okay, so just bear in mind, while all of this is happening, I had a look at this hashtag, Amber Heard is a monster. So that's how it came on my radar. I was like, oh. And I think what had happened previous to that was, like I say, a friend of mine had responded to a excerpt of the document saying that Amber's a stripper. And they were like kind of really reveling in that. Oh, we found something else. And I think that was the point. The point was to find negative content on Amber and then start the whole hate fest thing going again, and then you can get money from hate views. That was the whole point. And so I was like, oh, okay, so is there something game changing about these unsealed documents? And a part of me thought, have I actually been wrong? Like, is something not there that I've missed? Or, sorry, is something there that I've missed? And when I see it, I'm going to realize, oh, crap, I've actually been wrong about all of this. So are we going to find in the unsealed documents, it's one thing after another? Amber did this, Amber did that. She is actually a monster. Now, the thought crossed my mind. And so I thought, what is this thing that is so horrible that she's done? And it turned out to be stripping, and I'm not sure really what else. And then there were all these things from Johnny Depp that came out, which appeared like the unsealed documents backfired on his community. So, but I want to come back to this question. Where do you go? Where should you go to find the truth, right? Is a trending hashtag reliable? So let's ask that question and get some interaction from you guys. Let's see what you guys say. So it's a simple question. Is a trending hashtag reliable? Is a trending hashtag the truth? Let's put it over there. Stephanie says, anyone can pay for symmetry. Corporal Deb says, I believe Amber is beautiful. Okay. Okay, so Holly says, no, not reliable. Anyone else? Is a trending hashtag reliable? So is that like a little piece of truth that's sort of throbbing out at you on social media? So I'm seeing quite a few no's. No way. No, it's not reliable. No. Katie, clever one, ask Elon Musk. So a lot of no's, right? So can you imagine if a juror was like really meaning well, and he's like, I'm not gonna go on social media. I'm not gonna go on Twitter. But he nevertheless opens his phone. Or he says, I'm going to go on Twitter, but I'm not going to pay any attention to deficit. I'm not going to do that. And then there it is trending. And that the trending hashtag is Amber Heard is a liar. Amber Heard is guilty. Amber Heard is a turd. All that. Just all of that. Is that going to have any impact? Right? If a lot of people all think the same thing, is that going to have an impact to a jury, which is about a jury all coming to the same decision? So anyway, so I thought I would do a little bit of behind the scenes here, and I thought I want to look at the #1 tweet from the hashtag Amber Heard is a monster, right? So she's obviously done something wrong. Amber Heard has obviously done something wrong. Who is the top tweeter that is making the case for that? And it was this one. It was this one. So I'm going to make myself a bit smaller. Well, that's not quite what I want to do. And this is there you can see it. Hashtag Amber Heard is a monster. Top tweet, that's the very top one. And it had been there for quite a long time. The tweet was put up 20 hours earlier. Rando bot 3000 with a skull and crossbones. I guess that means I'm a Deb fan. And then she says, I truly believe that 99% of the women that support the defendant, meaning that person, do so because they are just like her and probably have done the same whatever. And there it is. Okay. And there you have that picture of Amber, and there you have that picture of Johnny. And that's really the bottom line of this whole trial. Amber's the abuser and Johnny is the victim. And as we said earlier, in this, he's saying, I'm not alleging any harm took place. There was no specific physical or mental injury. That's from his own team, right? But it seems like the internet doesn't care about that, because they're saying poor Johnny was hurt, and that's what we care about. He's a survivor of the abuse, but actually he didn't suffer any. So there it goes. He's not alleging any harm based on specific physical or mental injury. What about the supposed injury to his what about the supposed injury to his finger that everyone sort of spoke about as well? So anyway, so this is all about she hurt him, and although he's a man, he suffered and he was really traumatized and he got hurt. Then there's this one as well, and then I took it a little bit further. Nobody really does this. I went to have a look at the profile of Randobot 3000, and it turned out that Randobot 3000, when I looked, is a social media account with 140 followers. So someone with 140 followers is the most popular on this hashtag. And while I was sort of still looking, I think Randobot got another 2 followers. And so you've got to ask yourself, is Randobot 3000 plus emoticon for skull and crossbones a sober and concise source for analysis? You can see here she got, or I presume it's she, but I guess he or she got 1,185 likes for this particular post. So anyone who supports Amber Heard must be like Amber Heard. So, okay. So is this a more accurate post? This one here. It's the first time I've ever seen this person, but she uses this hashtag that I haven't seen before, DAVO-DEP, and you know what DAVO stands for? Do you guys know what DAVO stands for? It stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. And it's actually a very effective way of defending somebody. You see it taking place in a way it feels like it's taking place in the Caitlin Armstrong case. Pauline Buckles says she won't get an appeal if she is bankrupt and can't pay attorneys. So she seems to know something that we don't. Does she have a book deal lined up? We'll see, I guess. If she does have a book deal, is it for, let's say, 9 million, and she needs that other million, the 10th million, from the house? Is that how it's working? Anyway, she goes on to say, so funny enough, I was just watching a documentary on Netflix about revenge porn. And so this idea that Johnny wanted to put nude photos into the court narrative, I thought was, I found it kind of revolting, given I just watched this documentary, The Most Hated Man on the Internet. It also says here that Johnny Depp fans paid $3,000 to unseal the court documents in an effort to learn more about Amber. So although that this is written here, I don't know whether I believe it. I don't know if marker.com is a credible source, but I mean, it says here, in a recent report by the Daily Beast, he paid that amount of money. Now, I do think the Daily Beast is more credible than marker.com, in my opinion. I do find the Daily Beast quite political and quite biased, but nevertheless quite credible as well. So is that true? Then there's this one as well. So the question is, which of these tweets is true? And to be honest, I don't know whether either of them are true, but I guess one is perhaps more true than the other. You can see kind of how binary it is as well. But anyway, I went and looked at the Chateau Bunny thread. and it was very detailed, and I was actually quite surprised at how much information there was on Amber, sorry, on Johnny in these unsealed documents. So the New York Post seems to sort of play it both ways here. Basically, crude texts on the one side with Marilyn Manson, exotic dancer claims on the other side over there. The part that I want to talk about now is what is it? I think I've just scrolled past it. After we talk about how relative is the truth, I want to talk about the whole stripper side of it. Let me just put this link out. Sorry, I did think I had put the link out. And with specifically when I talk about the idea of erectile dysfunction and whether you can connect that to things like impotent rage. Now, I must say, when I saw the words impotent rage while I was doing research, I kind of thought, is impotent rage literally when you are impotent and you get really, really, really angry? I mean, you know, being very literal. Is impotent rage where you're like trying to, you kind of want to do something, but you just can't, and then you freak out? But it turns out that it's not really that, although I think there should be a term, something like that. Impotent rage means you can just be, in general, be powerless, and that makes you even more angry. I think incels suffer from impotent rage. I think a lot of the impotent rage that is directed to Amber is based on other women who feel powerless or helpless in the face of I don't know, whatever it is, women who come along and steal their husbands or boyfriends, or get the boss's attention, or whatever, all the usurpers, right? I think that's where that impotent rage comes from. Hybrid Pisces says impotent rage is very real in the literal sense. Yeah. But that's what I want to talk about. And it was quite strange how hard it was to find stats. I didn't spend a huge amount of time on it, but I was looking for stats showing, is there, for example, a relationship between, let's say, erectile dysfunction and intimate partner violence, kind of thing. And I found a really interesting research showing the intimate partner violence where you have a pregnant woman who has what do they call it? She's not impotent, but she's unable to perform, and then that leads to the partner becoming very upset. So it's, in other words, the reverse. I want to have sex with you, I can't, now I'm really angry, as opposed to I want to have sex, I can't, now I'm very angry, kind of thing. So that's really an interesting question choice. That's definitely a thought that comes to mind. I couldn't help thinking, erectile dysfunction, is that what all of this has actually been about, in a weird way? Is this actually, in a nutshell, why there's been all of this heartache and screaming and much ado? Is it all about that? Gathering places, statistics show increases in violence during pregnancy. Yeah. Okay, so I shouldn't laugh, but when a man is impotent, he often becomes a tyrant. Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. But of course, drugs and alcohol can also make men impotent. In fact, what's quite weird and maybe quite unfair is alcohol tends to make men impotent. I don't know, I don't think it applies to women so much. But certainly a woman can still perform if she's drinking, whereas a man can't, because there's a bit of a different mechanism that's going on. So yeah. And so if you can't perform, don't you just blame your partner? You know, I'm not aroused by you. Well, it's your fault. You know, it's got nothing to do with what I'm doing or me. It's all your fault. You stressing me out. You whatever. Okay, so that's what I really want to talk about. I'm not quite done yet with how relative is the truth. So I was also saying, is the news the truth? Or to fine tune slightly, is news better truth than social media? Than going to a hashtag and going to what that one said? You know, is going to the news better than this hashtag or that user, right? I don't know. I don't think it's rocket science to say it's much better. You're getting a lot more information by going to these various articles, right? You're getting the facts. Maybe some facts you disagree with and some viewpoints you disagree with, but there's far more information. So I was actually quite appalled, and there are probably going to be some of you here who are going to say, what? I can't believe you just said that unsubscribe. But I was appalled when recently I put up a poll on YouTube to find that most of my own subscribers believe that social media is more accurate or truthful than the actual news media. And I mean, social media half the time is putting up news stories. So look at that. Which is more fake news? Mainstream media, 66%. That's 2/3 saying that. This is quite a lot of votes as well, over 2,000. Social media, just a third. A third of fake news is social media. Well, if you look at these posts here, sorry, not that one. Although this has got 1,100 likes, is that a factual statement? And then you look at this one, and it's referring to a news story which is based in turn on another news story. It doesn't have as many likes, but it's social media giving an opinion on a news story. And that is often what social media does. It's derivative from what's happening in the news, right? So I don't know. I find it kind of appalling. That situation, probably because I'm a journalist. I find it kind of appalling. I've spent so many years writing books trying to associate my work with credible news stories. I've spent so much time trying to build up my credibility, only to find in 2022 nobody cares. Does credibility even matter anymore? And you know, it's like this weird thing. Johnny Depp was credible in this trial. Amber Heard wasn't credible, but then nothing is credible around that. So it's like, I'm not credible, but I can say he's not credible, and then that makes me credible. I don't know how that works. I mean, if we go back to this, does credibility even matter anymore? So you have this tweet, and it gets 84 likes, and you can go and look at this person's profile, right? And then you get that tweet, well, I agree with it, so now it's the top tweet, and this person's actually only got 140 followers, but I agree with it, so now it's credible. So is credibility now just based on popularity? So let me ask you guys, does credibility matter anymore? And I think one's kind of got to ask, are people really upset because Amber lied, or do they just trying to find a way to hate Amber Heard? Are we really so upset about liars? Is that really what's going on? Or is it I'm projecting a usurping scenario here? And so this has got nothing to do with whether Amber Heard's telling the truth. It's got to do with what's happening here resonates with me. The hatred resonates with me, and that's credible. The resonating part is definitely true. The resonating part is emotionally true, and that's the new truth. Tommy says credibility counts with honest people. Yeah, it should. Credibility should also count with the true crime community. It doesn't seem to anymore. It doesn't seem to anymore. Is credibility based on popularity? So if you're popular, you're credible. If you're more popular, you're more credible. Because Johnny Depp was more popular, he's more credible. So if you took the same situation, let's say Amber and Johnny stayed married for another 10 years and Amber became this huge star. She made like 100 million per movie and Johnny just didn't make any money. And Amber actually became this massive star and set up that whole cultural fabric that Johnny managed to set up. And then there was a trial. Would she just automatically then be credible and he wouldn't be? Is that how it works? Robin says, I'm not sure anyone believes social media and news because it's sensationalized. Robin, I think you'll be surprised. A lot of people believe social media like it's gospel. I covered Elvis the other night, and I said there's not a single photo of the toilet where the scene where Elvis died, and I was told no, there definitely is. It's on social media. I'll send you the video, and you can't. It's not there. But they're insisting no, it is there. I'll talk about that a bit more when we cover Elvis, but there are a lot of people who get clickbaited and who get told things on social media and they absolutely think it's true. I actually saw a news story that I think is written from a Pakistani, it's either Pakistan or the Philippines, but it's .pk website that said something like Amber has lied her entire life, and it was based on what a YouTuber had said. And in other words, it's a mainstream news story in some obscure other country, getting their so-called facts from a YouTuber's opinion. It's like, whoa, you know. Yin Yang says, my opinion of the case would be the same if he or she were someone else. SM Kobelinsky says, it's true, social media has replaced factual news for many. Well, that means you can theoretically invent reality. You can say, if you say enough times, there are no floods right now in Kentucky, well, then there aren't, I suppose, if enough people believe that. Gathering Places, are you adopting the devil's advocate just to keep us all riled up? No, not at all. I'm definitely not playing devil's advocate at all. I do have my opinion is based on my legal knowledge and my legal assessment, and it was the same before the trial, during the trial, after the trial. Bonnie says, I think there was a lot of mixed feelings and questions about Danielle Redlick. She also had an alcohol problem. I did not see something about that case at all. What do you mean I did not see what? Something about that case at all? Anyway, the Danielle Redlick case is a really great case to juxtapose with Amber and say a lot of people who hate Amber Heard think this is what a victim must sound like, and you say, is that so? Is that so? And was that jury, so the jury in the Redlick case was spot on, 100% spot on. And I don't know, I think there's a counter argument to that. I think you can say in Depp versus Heard, was that outcome what legal experts expected? Talking about the people not on social media, the legal experts watching this from afar. And you might not think so, but I consider myself one of them. Writing about the law for 10 years, studying the law at university, and kind of going, that doesn't make sense from a strictly legal perspective. And then those same people saying the outcome in the Redlick case, perfect. That's exactly what and it's like, can we rely on juries going forward? So Robin says, where do you get reliable news? I don't know if you're asking me that, but if you are asking me that, I think the thing that you've got to bring into that is your own filter. Do you have a filter? Do you have a news filter? Do you have a fact filter? Are you intelligent? Do you think critically? And then also, just like, so what are your news sources? And have you over time developed the capacity to go even with reliable news sources? So if you can say objectively X is a reliable news source, do you have the ability to go, I trust that, I trust that, I trust that that part I actually know for a fact isn't strictly speaking accurate. And I actually came across a piece, I put it up on Patreon, where some well-known commentators on a particular case said something that wasn't particularly smart or insightful, not necessarily not accurate, but something else. And you only get it from thinking critically and doing that kind of as a habit. Yin Yang says, I followed you, Nick, from the start, and I've always agreed with you in your cases. I really ponder why I don't in this case. I get that quite a lot. Nick, I agreed with you in Amanda Knox. I agreed with you in that. I agreed with you, but I don't here. Unsubscribe. Okay. I guess it must mean I was wrong with everything. I also think it's a bit immature to say, I don't agree with you here, so I'm out. Because one of the signs of an intelligent person is you're able to think about two opposing truths at the same time. You're able to keep two opposing truths like in your mind at the same time. And I think a marriage is a lot like that, where you think, this is what I want. My wife or my husband who I love believes something else, but because I love them, I'm going to kind of tolerate and deal with this opposing view. I'm not going to be binary. I'm not going to be, my way or the highway. Hybrid Pisces says it's okay to disagree. Yin Yang, she expressed that so kindly. Okay. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. Okay, let's go on. So does credibility even matter anymore? You know what? It should, but it doesn't. That's what I find terrifying. The reality is it doesn't matter. It should matter, but it doesn't matter. And I'm trying to create a community that where it does matter and it will always matter. It matters that I'm credible. It matters that I get my information from a credible source, that I tell you where I get it from, that we know we can navigate our way through reality. Because if your sources, your source of information isn't credible, then not only are you not credible, but your reality isn't real. And you might think, yes, but I'm floating through reality and it suits me just fine, until it doesn't, until disaster strikes. I still don't understand how embellishing a bruise. I'm talking about, let's say that Amber did try and enhance a bruise that she got, right? And it looks like Johnny did the same thing. I still don't understand how embellishing a bruise is somehow worse than the idea that someone inflicted it. So if you say, I've got a small bruise here and it's not really that bad, but you know what? For me, it was quite bad getting it, so I want to emphasize it. And now your sin is emphasizing that you are trying to make the bruise you got worse, not the fact that you actually got hit in the face. So it's like, what's worse, editing a picture or being hit in the face? I don't know. It's like the real crime is that the police botched the investigation, not that JonBenet Ramsey was killed. The real crime is what the police did. It's the real crime is that the police made some error, not the crime itself. Well, if you say so. in reality, the real crime is the crime. That's the crime. But Darvo works, no, let's invert it somehow. From my current glossing over understanding of debt versus herd, this article, which came out today, says Hurd turned down a potential $16 million divorce settlement. That's this one. Where is it? That's this one. That's from the Mail Online. Oh, sorry. Let's just bring it up there. So, Robin, you might say, is that where you get your news from? You get it from the Daily Mail. Well, the Daily Mail is a tabloid. Well, I get it from the Daily Mail, and you can kind of go through 10 sources, and you're going to get an average idea of what they're all saying through them. I also think you don't just get your news from one place. You've got to spend some time looking at it. And I often find when I'm covering anything that the people criticizing me or complaining or disagreeing have spent 1% as much time as I have looking at something. And I'm the first person to say, if you've spent 100 hours on something and I've spent 10, then I defer to your wisdom. But did you really spend 100 times on it? And then, great, then let's have a conversation. I'd love to have a conversation with you if you have spent so much time, because that confers on you some expertise. I think Gladwell said that 10,000 hours spent on something confers expertise. 10,000 hours. I don't know how many hours it takes to write a book, but I would argue quite a lot. Donna McLeod says, I could not listen to the Elvis stuff. I've been a huge fan since I was young. I believe Priscilla and her parents and Tom Parker were disturbing. Just my opinion. Donna, I hope you will listen, because there's definitely some... I come into it from a totally different angle, and we're going to deal with all the women that Elvis loved and the relationships he had with them in the next one. That's really going to be interesting. I didn't want to do it tonight because I felt like I needed another 4 or 5 hours to put it all together, and I didn't want to rush it. Tammy says, with all due respect, you're making large assumptions in this video and kind of sounding on the edge of a bit condescending. How do you know who's an expert here or not? Okay, well, are you an expert, Tammy? So you're not an expert because I am, kind of thing. Is that the thing? I don't know, Tammy, are you new here? I don't know if I've seen your name before, but if you are, not sure I've seen you before. Kathy says both sides are said to have edited their photos. So you're not going to hear haters talking about the 16 million divorce settlement. Instead, it's how she lied about not giving money to charity. Is truth relative, or is it relative and subservient to hate views? Think about the destiny of a society where truth and reality is a byproduct of hate. So if you say, like, this particular thing, it's all about, I want to hate Amber Heard, and so you get all of that. So guess what's going to happen? Randobot is going to make another post that is in the same vein, right? Let me read that again. Is truth relative, or is it relative and subservient to hate views? Is truth subservient to hate views, which means I can make money out of hate. And so truth now becomes subservient to that. And so the destiny of society is now where reality is a byproduct of hate. Where do you think that society is heading? Where do you think that society is heading? I think it's heading to a society that's going to split apart. It's a society that well, a society that hates itself isn't a society, obviously, that loves itself. It's a splintering society. It's a fragmented society. It's a society on a downward spiral. Tommy says, I'm enjoying News Nation right now. They've certainly grown since Gabby Petito. Yeah, truth should not be relative, but you may be like, well, I'm from this political party, or I believe in God, thus whatever. And so truth is relative to that. But is that what truth is? Truth shouldn't be relative, but it is, unfortunately. Okay, so recently I've noticed a handful of not credible news sources claiming Amber has filed for bankruptcy. So someone said, where do you get your news? So sometimes I do see news and I just don't accept it. So are you able to do that? If you see a headline, it's automatically news. And I'm dealing with this all the time. I had a conversation with my brother about COVID, and he then sent me a news story about the origins of COVID. And I said, can you see under that Yahoo News banner the actual source of that news story? It's not actually from Yahoo News, it's from some obscure other platform, etc., etc. Anyway, so I was seeing that Amber Heard has filed for bankruptcy, but although the news sounded right, sounded topical, sounded true, it wasn't true. And of course, it wasn't coming from any credible news media. And you would have think if Amber did file for bankruptcy, all the platforms would be talking about it. But then she didn't. She hasn't. Maybe she will soon. We'll see. But I'm just saying that's also how you decide what's reliable or not. You've got to use your common sense. I do think for those who hate Amber Heard, I think you've got to, I don't know, I feel for her that she's actually sold her own home. I mean, imagine you doing that. Imagine in order to fight a courtroom thing, which is almost intangible, in order to have a argument in a legal sense, you sell your own home. You don't even have your own home anymore. And what do you get out of that? Well, just maybe clearing your name. And she gets 1 million for that. Johnny Depp makes 3 times more just by selling art pieces. He's still got all the homes that he's got. It kind of does show you that Amber's quite invested, but one's got to wonder, as much as I support Amber's legal argument, right? I don't know whether I would give her the advice to pursue it, given her financial situation. I mean, is Amber Heard going to sell book rights to her story? I can't imagine that she can continue to pursue her legal plans without a significant amount of money, and thus far she simply doesn't have it. So what do you guys think? Is this story going to end with some legally sensible conclusion? Is the end of the story going to be some legally sensible conclusion? Or is it going to be something that is self-destructive, like the end of the Marilyn Monroe story, the end of the Elvis Presley story? I've got to also say, if this story, the story that we so many are paying attention to, and that's again why those who sneer at it and say, you know what, I'm not even interested in Depp versus Heard. If this story, which is a circus, which is a farce, if it doesn't end in a legally sensible conclusion, be warned, our story may not end like that either. So the Depp versus Heard thing is a kind of a legal microcosm for justice in our world. Is justice a what's the word, a realistic target, or has justice fallen by the wayside now? There's now only justice in the court of social media opinion. So let me just put that point there. I think it's quite an important one. I don't know if you guys notice I'm looking at philosophical issues surrounding all of this. And that I find quite interesting. And I know a lot of the people in Team Johnny and Team Amber don't want to have those conversations. It's just who can shout the loudest, I hate Johnny or I hate Amber. I want to kind of have a different conversation. Hi, Nisi. Good to see you. Nisi, by the way, my comment about trimming subscribers wasn't like I'm going to trim them. It was they're going to trim themselves. Like I disagree with him. I'm God, right? Not there. It says, will the punishment fit the crime? Okay. So here's another part that I found quite interesting from the unsealed documents. And this is from Newsweek, and I'm going to have to read a couple of expletives here. Among the new unsealed documents are exhibits of text messages that Deb's then assistant Stephen Deuters sent to Heard in 2014. So Deb's assistant sends to Heard in 2014. It's about the time Deb allegedly kicked her during a fight aboard a private jet. So, of course, if you say Johnny Depp didn't abuse Amber, he never, none of those 14 incidents ever happened. Not one of them happened. So Deuters then must be part of a conspiracy going back 8 years. So in 2014, Amber was thinking, we're going to have a court case and I'm going to write an article and then Johnny's going to sue me and we're going to use this to get him back. Is that what you realistically think was being plotted all along? Anyway, so this is what Deuters wrote. If someone was truly honest with him, meaning honest with Johnny, about how bad it really was, meaning this incident, he would be appalled. And then Deuters texted Heard also, I'm sad he does not have a better way to really know the severity of his actions yesterday. That's a reference to Johnny. Unfortunately for me, apparently, I remember them in full detail, everything that happened. He was appalled when I told him he kicked you. He cried. And then Deb subsequently texted Heard, according to these documents, in this whole time, quote, once again, I find myself in a place of shame and regret. Of course, I'm sorry. I will never do it again. My illness somehow crept up and grabbed me. I feel so bad for letting you down. And so you say, what's that all about? Oh, no. I actually feel sorry for Johnny. He's the victim here. And anyway, look how sorry he was. And then you say, okay, so you feel sorry for him, but what does he say? He does not allege a specific cause of action for negligent infliction of emotional distress, or that she caused him a psychiatric injury, or that it was a physical injury. So why are you feeling sorry for Johnny if he's saying that it's his own legal position? That's his own legal position, according to this. So it goes on to say, in messages retained by Heard, sorry, I'm not showing you that actual thing. There it is. Where is it now? In messages retained by Heard, he subsequently texted to apologize while calling himself a effing savage and a lunatic. What do you think that refers to? I threw a glass and so I was an effing savage. Those are self-disclosures. Anyway, it goes on to say, Depp's law firm, Brown Rudnick, could not find any record of the text in Depp's iCloud and looked into whether they may have been deleted. Ultimately, the law firm determined they were missing for reasons unknown. Oh, so Johnny's got missing texts, no big deal. These texts regarding the kicking incident were presented in the UK trial, but not deemed admissible in the Virginia defamation trial. So you kind of got to ask, why was there an outcome in the UK trial but not in the US trial. Like, what was in the UK trial that wasn't in the US trial? Just trying to see whether I agree with this statement. All 14 incidences were all conjured by an ex-stripper. Sounds ridiculous. It's because it is. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that. I do think the mistake from Amber's side was not being more explicit that there were 14 incidents and like going through them one by one. You know, like you just got the idea that there was a lot of these incidents. It could be that they weren't allowed to mention certain of them and they didn't want to hem themselves in. I don't know. But so you say, why did the UK trial come to one decision and the US trial come to another? And then you say, well, because the UK trial wasn't credible, because the judge in the trial wasn't credible, because the evidence wasn't credible, because blah, 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 not credible. UK trial not credible, US trial credible. Well, another way of arguing it is certain evidence that should have been admitted wasn't, or certain evidence that wasn't in was right not to be in. Is this an example of that? Tammy says, well, I think is a resident expert here, says, I still don't think that these texts are very damning, to be honest. Still doesn't sway my outcome. And the UK trial had an allegedly biased judge while the US trial had a jury. So there's Tammy's expertise. The the UK judge was biased. Okay, so there you have it. And the US jury weren't biased at all. Um, I don't think the UK trial was live streamed. I don't think there was a social media shitstorm anywhere close to the one that we've just had, but the bias was all in the UK trial. And bear in mind, both these stars are American stars, not UK stars. So you have two American people in the UK and then a British paper, but no, it's biased. Okay. No chance that the US jury was biased. And so you say the US jury, Tammy, let me ask you a question. Was the US jury, as far as you're concerned, 100% right? Like, thumbs up, I endorse them. I'm really happy. So do you give the US jury a full seal of approval, a full your full support? Yes or no? So Tammy Lynn is like, ha ha. I don't think it's really funny. I think we're talking about something that's quite serious here. Is the legal outcome of a trial right and legal or not? I don't think it's a joke. But let's say you answered the question, I think the American jury are 100% awesome. Well, then you've got to say, well, then why did Johnny Depp and Amber Heard appeal this verdict that's supposed to be so wonderful? Both sides appealed. That's like basically saying neither side are very happy with whatever you decided. Onesie says the US and UK have different values. I find that quite worrying. I find that quite worrying. If that's true, what does it say about, in a way, both countries? What does it say, in a way, about one of those countries? And I mean, even if you say, the jury were awesome, you had the mess with one of the jurors. You even had the TikTok, you had the social media mess with someone faking being a juror. Did that happen in the UK? I don't know. It's just, I don't know. You're not being biased because you're an American that the UK process is shitty just because you're in America. If you lived in the UK, would you say America's legal process is shitty? Just asking. Anyway, let's move on to, do you think, it's a question, do you think a rich, powerful, hedonistic celebrity, just a neutral question, do you think a rich, powerful, hedonistic celebrity suffering from erectile dysfunction might eventually lead to sexual violence in some or any way? Did you guys get that? Should I put it up again? Let's put up another image. What do you guys think of the answer to that? Yeah, I've heard people saying, let's talk about Kurt Cobain, but if you guys don't mind, it's like, let's finish our analysis on Elvis. And to be honest, I'm kind of interested in the somewhat mysterious circumstances of Marilyn Monroe's death. I wouldn't do a whole series on it, but I would certainly want to look at that. I also don't want to turn this channel into like Celebrity Central. It's not. This is about criminal cases, more specifically murder cases, and I don't want to go into civil and celebrity, but this is quite important, I feel. Once he says, I've lived in both countries and values are really different. UK is more serious, where US is more superficial. That's your view there. It's quite interesting. Soft Reset says, regarding your community question from earlier, I'm not quite sure what that's with relation to. Rita Book says, I watched someone and Amber lied. It's quite simple. Even if Amber lied, it doesn't mean it's a little bit different to a criminal case where if you committed murder and you lied and all that kind of thing. An absolute defense of defamation is if one of those incidents is true. If Johnny Depp hit her once on the cheek, and even if it wasn't even really that hard, then she's been a victim in that particular scenario. It doesn't have to be 14 out of 14 or even half of them. Just one incident's got to be true. And I don't know if you guys know, you probably won't like this if I tell you, but did you know that Elvis allegedly hit Ginger, his last fiancée? Well, she says that. Did you guys know that? And so you say, no, he definitely didn't. But if you think about it, Elvis was often on substances as well. And Elvis, I think, is quite a good guy. But being on substances constantly, your chance of doing something is very, 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 very high. If you've ever been with an addict or an alcoholic, your chance of eventually being hit when they're angry about something is very, 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 very high. So to say it never, ever, ever, ever happened, to me is just absurd. But if you want to have a logic failure, if you want to insist on having a logic failure, I guess you can. That's just my view. Let's have a look at some of the new comments. Corporal Deb says, yes, I read that about Elvis. So now we're going to talk about the erectile dysfunction side. So if Amber Heard was a stripper, would that be relevant to a trial about defamation and being abused by Depp, right? I think the only relevance is that Depp wanted to introduce that as evidence. But how about Team Heard wanting to introduce the possibility of erectile dysfunction? So let me ask you guys, do you think whether you support Amber or whether you support Johnny, let's say even if you support Johnny Depp, do you think his erectile dysfunction, if it's real, I mean, I don't know whether it's definitely a fact. I think one's got to be explicit about that it's alleged. You can also say, I think it's true or whatever. I think it's not true, but I did see a website where it was covered in the news and they said, I don't want to know this. Why is this news, right? But do you think that it is relevant to this legal story? So to me, there are two questions. The one is it relevant in a strictly legal sense? And to be honest, I don't know the answer to that. I sort of suspect that it could be or that it should be, but it might not be. You might say it's privileged because it's health, with those HIPAA laws or whatever. On the other hand, you might say this goes to the actual dynamics of their relationship. This is a factual thing, but again, I'm not, my expertise in the law is definitely not to that level where I can think very, very clearly on that particular issue. HI says, I read that op-ed 5 times. I didn't find it bad in any way. Mel Stiller says erectile dysfunction goes hand in hand with the consumption of drugs and alcohol. Absolutely. So, if you're going to introduce the drug and alcohol narrative, which they did, can't you say, one of the consequences of this unusual amount, this unusual consumption was that? I'd be surprised if Elvis didn't have the same problem. And so can that then start causing problems in a relationship? And what are the responses to that? If you want to have sex, but you can't have sex, is that going to make you enjoy your marriage? Is that going to lead to insecurity? Now think about this. You can't have sex with someone and they're really beautiful and then they go and act in a movie with handsome co-stars. Isn't that going to make you legitimately insecure, legitimately inadequate? They're younger than you and they're more virile, whatever. I'm just saying hypothetically, wouldn't that make you feel weird? And if you get drunk while you're feeling weird, wouldn't you feel even worse? Ale Grenade, I don't know how to say your name. Is it All Grenade? Erectile dysfunction can be caused by loathing the situation you're in. Yeah, I know that's what some people are saying. I must say, if you're going to make that assertion, that you're kind of going to say, okay, I ignore all these substances. The substances had nothing to do with it. I think there was loathing, but I think, were there ever times that Johnny wanted to, be amorous with Amber and couldn't? Were there any times that she wanted, when they were in love? Bear in mind they were together, was it 4 years? From 2012 to 2016. 4 or 5 years. Were there any times where she was feeling affectionate towards him and things weren't working out? When things were kind of going well, when he did love her, when he did like her, and then that led to problems? Yeah, so Terry, when you say it's plausible that person doesn't do it for you, you're talking about some of the most highly paid movie stars. Yeah, I don't know. You're making it very Ale Grenade, is that it? Ale Grenade. Anyway, let's go on. So let's pretend we're not experts here and say, okay, so do you think erectile dysfunction, in your opinion, could sort of have been relevant to all of this? I think so. Do you think a drunk high superstar that wants to have sex but can't might get a little unhinged? Someone who's used to getting his way, someone who's a sex symbol. It's like, just think of it like this: a sex symbol who wants to have sex. If you can't have sex, is that going to be a little bit irritating? Do you get where I'm coming from? Does that make sense? Just that obviously it's going to be an issue. Obviously it's going to lead to feelings of unhappiness. Obviously it's going to cause problems. In the medical documentation, so although you might say that, you should also say, okay, so let's get some reliable information. Somebody asked earlier, where do you get your reliable information? Well, a really good source for reliable information dealing with, how can I put it, causal links and statistical links and scientific evidence, if you want to put it that way, are peer-reviewed papers. So papers written by really intelligent, and I'm not saying if something's peer-reviewed, it's gospel. I'm simply saying it tends to be well researched. There've been trials, there's been, and I did study statistics at university as well. There've been a certain number of individuals tested, and then they find a relationship, a statistical relationship between, these certain factors. And again, even though there's a relationship, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily a fact or the truth, but it's certainly pointing you in that direction, right? So things like that's one thing. Another one is just broad stats, where you just feed numbers into a algorithm, and then it just shows you on a graph that's what the link is. And I thought I was going to find document, and so often I look for this in true crime and I just don't find it. And if I could live a second life, I would be a true crime statistician, where I would show all the statistical relationships for things that are being alleged or hypothesized in many cases. Honestly, I would do that, because so often that information is simply not there. So for example, you say, what is the statistical relationship between erectile dysfunction and violence? So in other words, where there's been a domestic assault and it's been documented as, well, my husband had erectile dysfunction or erectile problems, and then he smacked me. That was the reason. Does that happen in 8% of reported assaults? 1% or what? What's the story? So anyway, so it's not easily found, the link, but if you go to the medical documentation, drug abuse leads to erectile dysfunction. So that's absolutely kind of a cliche, but interestingly, far more so with men than with women. But basically, it's just a classic symptom. And I don't think you can be more sort of, what's the word, to generalize and say, in this case, if you take away the defamation, if you take away Johnny Depp's name, if you take away the Pirates of the Caribbean, if you take everything away, you just strip it down. If you take away the person on the other side is Amber Heard, she acted in Aquaman, strip that away and say, at its root, what is the story about? You could say it's about a drunk and high man, older man, in a troubled marriage with a young, also drunk and high woman, right? And you could make the argument maybe the guy was high more than the girl, or the girl was high more than the guy, but basically a marriage that didn't really work out because they were often drunk and high. And you could also say, did the being drunk and high, did it make their marriage better or worse? And sometimes it probably made their marriage better. But were there sometimes where being drunk and high, and but then also hung over and whatever, wasn't good for their marriage? And obviously the answer is yes. And then further, when you were drunk and high and things weren't going well and you couldn't have sex, what was that like? Answer, really not great. So this is the link that I referred to, this one here. You can see it's from the National Library of Medicine, Sexual Dysfunction in Men Who Abuse Illicit Drugs, a preliminary report. And there you can see some stats. Mean age, 33.8 years. I'm not going to go through it all, but you can see 18.4% reported to have enhanced sexual desire. Quite interesting. And they, so 18%, but they 38.6% decreased sexual desire. That's with illicit drug use. And you know, so there you get some scientific background to what you're talking about. So, of course, Depp's immense drug taking is no big schmooze, just as Elvis's wasn't. You know, Elvis dies and he's been taking thousands of drugs over a period of months. But no, it's not relevant at all. Same with Johnny Depp. You know, all of these incidents, no, let's not talk about drugs. But if you accept the drug narrative, then you sort of have to impute the sexual dysfunction narrative. And that might be a weird situation for a couple with a 20-year age gap, where part of the fine print of the actual marriage, part of the reason they got together, you can kind of imagine is the anticipation, the idea of earth-shaking sex. He's a sex symbol, albeit a sort of aging one. She's sort of one in the process of becoming one. You may not think so, but I think he thought so. At the time that he married her, he thought that she was a particular character, very sexual character in a Hunter S. Thompson novel, right? And the character in the Rum Diaries that she plays is very sexual. There's also a scene in that movie where she's in a crowd where there are a lot of men, and I think what's supposed to happen in that scene is she ends up, I don't think it's dramatized, but as far as I know, in the actual story, she ends up naked and surrounded by all of these men, and then you don't know what happens next, but you can obviously imagine. So you can see it's a very sexualized, it's actually a hypersexualized thing. And then he goes on to marry the star that plays that role. And he said he fell in love with her during kind of a shower scene. You know, that was what did it for him. So how can you not say that sex was a huge sort of light, or I don't know, it was a huge incentive for the relationship. And so when a sex symbol isn't having sex because he can't, what's that? How does that feel? Is that a bit of a downer? Is that a bit irritating? Could that lead one to becoming grumpy? Could that lead one to eventually becoming angry? What happens when you want to but can't, and the other person wants to and is like, what's wrong? Oh, okay. And then again, right? And then maybe as a joke says, old man. How does that feel? Is there a relationship, is there a link between erectile dysfunction and abuse in ordinary relationships? It seems obvious, but what are the facts? So you can go to the Cleveland Clinic. Again, it's somewhat scientific, and it says it's common for men with ED to feel angry. It's common. That makes sense. It's common that they'd feel frustrated, sad, unsure of themselves, or even less manly. But the first thing mentioned there is angry. And if you think about the word that Depp used most often in his angry slurs of Amber, it's a very ugly sexualized word for the female genitalia, starting with the word C and ending with the word T. He, in a way, sees Amber as just that. She's all that, but she's also just that. And it's also kind of a sense of, if he's got erectile dysfunction, was that the problem, that he couldn't enjoy that? Anyway, it says such feelings may lead to a lack of self-esteem and in severe cases to depression. Depression that accompanies ED is treatable. And so if you're depressed because of that, isn't that going to make you take even more drugs? Is that now Amber's fault or your fault? Can anger lead to violence? Can someone who's angry and they're under the influence, can that lead to violence? Oh, no, 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 no. Mel Stiller says sex appeal is the first thing we look for in a potential partner. Julie says it would be interesting to see his health records, actually. Yeah, I agree. Vicky says he shouldn't have left Vanessa. Okay, that's, I think, as far as I'm going to take it. I didn't really think I would be on for nearly as long as 2 hours. But this is the part that I think is also interesting. In another study where sexual dysfunction was related to young pregnant females, the prevalence of IPV was 63%. So a woman is pregnant, and let's see if I can just highlight it here. There, 63%. The most common type of IPV was psychological aggression. But the good news is it can take 5 years to reduce erectile dysfunction in drug adult males by 30%. So if you're in a situation where you got ED, the good news is it's just going to take 5 years to bring that down by 30%. So there you go. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to touch on here. I guess what we could look at is the house that Amber's selling, or pictures of the house. There's one of them. There's another. So she's going to have to give all of this up just to go to trial, just to have an appeal. I mean, this is just 1/10 of what she's got to pay. It's quite a lot. Is that because Amber is what's the word? Not thinking clearly, or because she knows for a fact that she's got a case? What do you think the answer is? Allegra Nade says, I don't think anyone has the right to say what JD is thinking. Well, if we apply that to true crime, then I should really shut up. I mean, I don't have the right to say what anyone's thinking. How dare you do any analysis on, for example, Brian Laundrie? How dare you? You know, could he be lying here? Well, how dare you think what he might be thinking? Okay. We don't have the right to do that. We don't have the right to think critically. Nisi says, and I agree with that, she must think she has a case to sell her house. That's a big thing. That's a great comment, Nisi. I agree with you. Kathy says she's confident in the timing and wants to have an impact. Yeah, obviously we're speculating what they're thinking. Obviously it's speculation. Stephanie says, no, we're all allowed to share our thoughts. Okay, so let's go back to the poll, if we dare. Who comes off worse in the unsealed documents? Amber, obviously, a whopping 60%, it's almost 2/3 saying Amber comes off worse. Do you say that because that's what you wish or because of what you know? Or have you been watching certain YouTube channels that are only focusing on that? Just 12% say Johnny, although another 7% say Johnny more than Amber. So I guess you could make that about 20%. 21% say they both lose a lot of credibility. So I think that Johnny comes off worse more than Amber does. I think Amber also, certain things don't reflect too well on her. For example, the stripper thing, it definitely doesn't reflect well on her. One or two other things as well. But I think especially those texts about the airplane incident and especially this sort of thing is very problematic. And yeah, you know, if you care about that, then it is definitely problematic. So yeah. So that is my spiel. We're going to be dealing with Elvis's woman probably tomorrow. Can you guys see that? Let's just bring that up. We're going to be dealing with Elvis's woman tomorrow, and there are quite a few, and they've really got some fascinating stories. I really started my analysis on that just by watching YouTube videos of some of these ladies giving interviews, and I couldn't help thinking, what are you leaving out? What are you embellishing? Are you being completely honest? And one thing that's quite interesting is where Elvis was cheating on, I think her name's Anita Wood. He was cheating on her with, I don't know if she was 14 years old, but she was certainly a teenager with Priscilla. And, you know, it's one thing to say Elvis was such a gentleman, he was such a nice guy, he had such a wonderful sense of humor, but are you going to say, yeah, well, he also cheated on me? You just turn it into the fairy tale that you enjoyed, and you know everybody loves you and everyone thinks, wow, you were with Elvis? Or are you also honest enough to say, well, there were moments that weren't that great? He cheated on me, he did this, he did that. You know, is that also acknowledged? And funnily enough, one of the most interesting interviews was, I think, by Linda Thompson, who was a Miss Tennessee, and not only beautiful but also quite clever. And I just thought that what she said was very, very interesting as well. Hi says, I'm not an Elvis fan. I'm not a Deb fan. I'm not either. My father was a big Elvis fan. Yeah. I actually been meaning to speak to my father about Elvis, but I just haven't really been able to get hold of him. Choice, thanks very much for that. Thanks, Nick, Mod, everyone else. So yeah, I think this is the only super chat I got for this effort $5 for over 2 hours work. So those who don't like me, don't like my channel, you can definitely high five yourself for that. If you are watching this in terms of the, what do you call it, the replay, and you're enjoying the coverage or you found it useful, you're welcome to hit the thanks button. Remember Elvis tomorrow. I think I've got another image here as well. We're going to be dealing with that tomorrow. It should be a really good episode. I'm definitely enjoying the Elvis sort of interlude. I've definitely found it definitely worth my time. It's definitely been quite interesting. And I've learned a little bit about America, about myself, about American culture in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and in a weird way about what is going on in the Netherlands as well at the same time. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Onesie. Any of you got any questions or comments you want to end off with before we go? Stephanie says, don't be so down. I think overall it was a good discussion. If you say so, Stephanie, thanks. Stephanie, I've actually got a thing that's really concerning me, a health question that I need to ask you about. I don't know whether I need surgery, but something has happened that, I don't know, just would wonder what you think about it. Soft Reset says, thank you, Nick. Please do another Everest stream. Yeah, I've seen some comments there. I would love to cover Everest, but I think it's even, I don't know if it's more niche than Van Gogh, but it is pretty niche. Katie says, would love your analysis on Marilyn Monroe's death. That is coming. That is something in preparation for dealing with the next episode on Elvis. I definitely went into that, and I was like, wow, there's actually quite a lot of intertextuality, you know, the drug taking, the time of death, all that kind of thing. Stretch it out, Nick. Stretch what out? No, it's actually something else, Zircon. It's not that. It's actually something else. Okay. Yeah, except the medical sites all say the only way to treat this is with surgery. That's why I don't want to go that route. Holly Go Lightly says it was a great discussion. Thank you. Donna McLeod says, I believe Priscilla lied about her age. One of his army buddies introduced them. Okay. Okay, so thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. Overall, I thought it was actually quite a nice bunch. There were some snarky comments here and there, including from me. I think it's quite hard to avoid with this case, but I just find the legal narrative here very interesting, and I'm kind of worried. I'm worried how this is how the legal journey is gonna go, and I'm also concerned, and I'm also gonna watch it. I'm sort of thinking, how on earth can this proceed without a book deal, without some sort of cash injection from Amberside? So I guess we'll see. So I'm going to end off this whole discussion by simply saying, why is Johnny Depp's drug use not a topic? Why is that not something that anyone's talking about? And I think the answer is because we're living in a drugified society. Drugs is now normal, and drugs are now the new abnormal. And I think that's not good, and I don't think that's right. I think all sorts of dysfunction and despair come about as a result of excessive drug use, and it ends unhappily ever after, as you see with Elvis and Marilyn. And those are cliches, but it's also a cliche because it's true. And I think that's part of the lesson that no one's learning in terms of depth versus hurt. You want to say, Depp is the bad guy, or you want to say Amber's the bad girl. But I think the real culprit here is drugs. Would they have had all the problems they had if neither of them were abusing drugs? What do you guys think? So on that note, thanks guys for listening. Take care, keep thinking critically, and see you guys next time.